Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show. I am so thrilled to be here. This is the show that celebrates coastal Mississippi and so many incredible leaders and characters who make this a great place to live, work, and play. We're going to be visiting here in just a minute or so with my friend Hunter Dawkins from the Gazebo Gazette, who's a major league contributor to SuperTalk Mississippi News. We'll come to him in just a second. I want to share a quote with you. I was doing some morning reading, and I came across the history book that I've mentioned before. It's a section of an aggregator newsletter that I get called 1440, and it said that President Harry Truman was born in May of 1884. I mean, I think when I think of Harry Truman, I think 40s, 50s, that time frame. I don't think of a man who was born in 1884. It's just pretty. It just caught my attention. Obviously, if you do the math, no big surprise there, obviously, but still. But there's a quote that they shared from him that, in fact, when I was doing the preparation for this, I was thinking about my outdoor show that I do every Monday for the SuperTalk Network, and I thought about going hunting or fishing. And when I thought about this particular quote, but really it applies to a lot of the people we come in contact with these days as it relates to social media or just in the course of doing our lives. But here's what Harry Truman said: "A pessimist is one who makes difficulties of his opportunities, and an optimist is one who makes opportunities of his difficulties." I think that's pretty good. An optimist is one who makes opportunities of his difficulties. That is so true. In fact, I was interested. I wanted to know, did Harry Truman spend a lot of time in the outdoors? And you may remember when you see a picture of Harry Truman, you see the glasses and had very thick lenses on his glasses. Truth is, he actually had eye issues as a child. And in my reading, what I discovered is that he once was proudly shared that in his local library he had read every book there. So what he did is he wasn't able to go out into the outdoors the way that normal kids were able to because of his eye issues. He didn't ever get into hunting, for example, like that, although he went to hunting lodges, etc. But he would enjoy taking pictures with other people who might have had some success in their hunting adventures. But he had really serious eye issues. And later in his life, and you may remember this, he loved to spend time in Key West. In fact, they had the Southern White House in Key West. Went there many, many times and just loved it there. Look it up and see some of the pictures. There were postcards that they developed from that time. And I love Key West, incidentally. I can't spend enough time down there. Loved Key West, but he spent time there. It was once written about him. I think it was in Time magazine or something like that said he, the locals wanted him to go. The chamber types wanted the president to go fishing, but he could take it or lose it. Take it or leave it. But he made the best of his experiences. But he really loved the salt air and playing volleyball and spending time on the beach. And one of the stories that told he liked to go swimming, and when there were cool days even for Key West, and even when it was cool days he would go swimming, and the Secret Service hated it because they had to get in the water with him and stay in the water as long as he was in the water. I thought that was kind of interesting. Hey, by the way, the termites are swarming all across coastal Mississippi. And my son sent me a video. I actually posted it at the SuperTalk. At the CoastView site. Actually, it's not CoastView anymore. It's the Ricky Mathews site. I have to get that in my head. But at the Ricky Mathews Facebook page, there's a picture that he took near. It was on Pops Ferry Road, near the Pops Ferry Road Bridge. You should go take a look at it. Boy, is it it's a nighttime photo of incredible number of swarming termites. So, one way to sort of limit the number of them that's going to sort of climb into your house is keep your lights off and keep your drapery shut at night. You can go do some research on that, but everyone's dealing with that right now. And I for one, don't like when the termites get inside my house during these swarming moments. But they are out. You should be aware of that. Okay, so let's shift gears now, move over to my friend Hunter Dawkins, who owns and is the editor and publisher of the Gazebo Gazette and Past Christian. They cover events for all across coastal Mississippi, but especially places like Bay St. Louis and Pass Christian and Long Beach. He's also a major contributor on a number of different dimensions to SuperTalk Mississippi News, and he's a good friend. How you doing, Hunter?
Ricky, I'm doing well, and I thank you again for the honor and privilege to be on your show. And also now it's the new name. This is the first time I've been on your show where it has a little bit of different music, a little bit of different atmosphere. And, I know it's not really different, but, I mean, to me, it's nice. It's nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We've got a lot of good feedback from it. When we initially posted about it, I checked the numbers on social media, and nearly 4,000 people engaged with the post about the change of the name, which I thought was incredible. And of course, we don't boost those. We don't boost social media. It's just organic.
Sure.
But what that tells me is that a lot of people are engaged, and it's cool. It's cool to have a show that is touching people in a positive way. I mean, again, we're going to get on issues from time to time, but we don't, as a general rule, do that. But when we do, my world as a publisher really helped inform me how to do that and how to do my homework regarding that. But it's been, I think we've made the marketing side of this a little bit simpler. So, in that regard, I think Coast View served us well for a long time, but people have responded positively to the change of the name. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's definitely something that a lot of people are following. I know you like to stay engaged regardless. That's something that is part of who you are. It's part of the atmosphere you developed and the legacy you developed in the coast life. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. It's been a great opportunity for me to stay engaged. I can tell you that, and I can't think of a funner gig to have in retirement than to have a show like Coast View. And the other thing is to be independent, which I write a lot about that. I write a lot about how cool it is to be independent. But look, here's the thing. Even though in my farmer life, whether it was with McClatchy or Knight Ridder or Advanced Condé Nast, I've said this many times, that the boards that I reported to supported me like you cannot imagine. So I had complete editorial responsibility. In other words, if I had an editorial or an issue I wanted to latch on, I didn't have to ever ask for permission. And here's the other thing. I never had anybody come down on me because of the heat. Not one time. They let me have total responsibility for that. And if it impacted us in any way negatively, they were supportive. And that's the same way it is for me now with SuperTalk Mississippi Media. Kim Dillon, the president of this company, and Steve Davenport, who owns SuperTalk Mississippi Media, unbelievably supportive.
They're great people. I got a chance to meet both of them last week. They're great people. Both of them are 100% in favor of bringing this coast life to view. So.
Yeah, it is great. Think about it for a minute. Steve, through an intermediary, discovered who I was. He didn't know me, and we were introduced, and you and I have talked about this before, but what's interesting about Steve, now that you've had the opportunity to meet him, and Kim, is that he had a vision. He has a vision for SuperTalk Mississippi Media, which is the more local they are. You already know this as a Gazebo Gazette publisher, but the more local they are, the more thought leaders they have in the conversation, the more success they're going to have. In a time when radio is all consolidating nationally, he's doing literally the opposite. And for him to have the vision to hang in there with me for 4 to 5 months while I thought about whether I really wanted to do this or not, it shows a lot of vision, doesn't it?
But I think what he told you, and I remember you saying this, he told you, I knew you were going to do it. He just wanted to make sure that, everything was okay and all that. And Kim, I had a great conversation with her. It was she is just like what you said. Everything's local. She wants to make sure everything that you and I and their other reporters get out it's local and people that contribute too. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited because what's this means for you is, first of all,
huge.
SuperTalk Mississippi Media has these thought leaders from across the state that are contributing, a bunch of them from the coast, which I'm so excited about. Hunter is one of them. But Hunter is more than that. He's contributing, professional sports coverage and college and high school coverage, just lots of stuff. There's some economies of scale between what he's doing with the Gazebo Gazette and what he's doing for SuperTalk Mississippi Media. He's able to write opinion pieces. It's really exciting. And then I don't know if it's even been decided yet, but Steve mentioned to me last week that they've been in conversations with you potentially about doing some play-by-play for SuperTalk, which would be terrific.
That is 100% accurate, Ricky. Both Kim, Steve, and the sales team have all spoken with me. We had a very long conversation. It was about 10 days ago where we sat in a room, and me and a friend of mine that is a radio guy, we all talked about, okay, well, where do we want to go? What do we want to do? What team do we want to get focused on? And we've made some good decisions, and we've once we get the contact from the school districts and they approve, we're going to go forward with it.
That's awesome. That's really good. Hey, we're visiting with Hunter Dawkins. When we come back, we'll look into some of the stories that he's been covering recently. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend Hunter Dawkins from the Gazebo Gazette. He was a regular here on the show and a major contributor to SuperTalk Mississippi News. Hey, Hunter, you heard that Harry Truman quote that I shared at the beginning.
I heard that good music that you had on there, too.
Oh, that great music for sure. Kyle's doing good, man. Kyle's doing really good. I like the kind of the blues feel to a lot of the music we have here. I think it fits perfectly to Mississippi. But anyway, Harry Truman said, a pessimist is the one who makes difficulties of his opportunities, and an optimist is one who makes opportunities of his difficulties. In the media world, we get to see both kinds of people, don't we?
Of course. And, unfortunately, and you know this very well, Ricky, that we have gone the pessimistic route overall in the media, not necessarily me, but from the general media perspective, they've gone the glass half empty instead of, looking for the positives. Not necessarily the positives on all format, because I know in this world there's a lot of interesting times going on, but trying to pull things out in the positive way is something that I have to agree with Truman on.
You said that. I think you said that well. One of the problems that I see in media, and this is true whether you're talking about the national stage or whether you're talking about statewide or even local, is that too often, especially now, in fact, I've been writing a little bit about this and may eventually write a column about it, but what we're seeing is that there's a move more toward nonprofit news operations. An example in Mississippi of a nonprofit news organization is Mississippi Today.
Yeah.
There are nonprofit news organizations, and what's happening, this is a trend across America, is that you're seeing people who have a political agenda who are providing the money for those operations.
Sure.
And unfortunately, you can't always understand. If you look at the 990 is a form that a nonprofit news organization has to file for the federal government. And if you go look at their 990s, you don't always see. You see who their contributors are, but you don't see how much money is coming from each contributor.
Sure.
And if you were to, let's say, for example, you were to look at Mississippi Today and say, okay, where's the majority of their funding coming from? Okay, I want to know from the moment they started through today, where has their funding come from? And I want to see the top contributors in order of top to least
and
contributor.
Their policy approaches. That's a lot of what you're talking about. They have a certain direction towards policies.
Yeah,
Ricky, the reporters for Mississippi Today, some of them worked for you. They're great reporters.
Yeah.
They have a ton of, but there's a lot of policy positions and things and sort of a formulation of, okay, well, we want, we're going to report it this way and this happened this way, yada, yada, yada. And it's not necessarily fair and balanced, but it's not necessarily it's very, confusing and complex.
I think what happens is you have a scenario where if you have some bias and direction. It may not necessarily be biased in the reporting itself, but it may be biased in the direction of the reporting, where they choose to cover stories and where they choose not to cover stories, right? Sure. Okay. So what you have there is what ends up happening, you have a situation where people, they're not exactly sure what to trust, okay? Because if there's a political agenda or some other policy agenda, like you just pointed out, that's driving their coverage objectives, then it causes people to wonder, and I see that a lot, actually, to be quite honest with you.
And to be fair to Mississippi Today, there are print newspapers that do the same thing, because let's just, for instance, say, this paper has a direction with Hinds County, the Board of Supervisors, that they give them legal notices and public notices and such. But they're not going to report on the fact that, the water is going way downhill, because that would tackle their, interest in legals and public with the Hinds County Board of Supervisors, even though they may not have the complete direction on that, if you see what I'm saying.
No, I think you're right. I mean, whether you have a single owner of a newspaper, whether you have advertisers that have specific needs, and you have to be sensitive to that when you're doing reporting. There's bias everywhere. But let me say this though, Hunter, as it relates to nonprofit news organizations, they don't, as a general rule, they don't have advertising.
Sure.
Some may try to do advertising, but a lot of their funding doesn't come from that. That's a small, if they get any, it's a very, very small number.
In the campaigns, I think they get some of that, some campaign. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, so if you have a nonprofit news organization, let's say your primary funder is giving you $1 million a year, and that primary funder is either active Republican or an active Democrat.
Sure.
You're beholden to sort of one major deal. Okay. Sure. Whereas the example that you gave, say there's some proceeds that come in as a result of running legals for a county. In the scheme of all of your revenue, it's still a relatively small piece relative to everything else.
I agree.
So nonprofit news organizations really do have a responsibility if they have say 3 or 4 of their funders are their main funders and have been their main funders from the very beginning. Don't make it look like you've got 30 when you may have 30, but when really 3 are paying the bill. Who are those 3? And what are their agendas? That's what the public deserves to know, right?
Of course, yeah. And just like you said about Mississippi, they have an investigative team that they've put together, and Lordy knows who is behind the money for that investigative team, because if they did not have such and such supporting them, there's no way that would be happening. So so not to just pick on them, just the point being that nonprofit news organizations, along with Fox and CNN and MSNBC. Oh, speaking of NBC, I should point out that Mississippi Today, the founding, if you go look at the founding president or chairman, however you want to refer to him, is Andy Lack. And Andy Lack came from NBC. Andy Lack had a long history at NBC of attacking conservatives. The Rachel Maddow show, the Morning Joe and Where the Morning Joe Is, and many other programs like that. Sure. He created MSNBC. So, for people who know that, he actually ended up having to leave. Actually, he was sort of ousted at NBC because of his efforts to try to stop certain news stories from happening. Yeah. I could go into more depth about it, but you just go do a search on Andy Lack. Yeah. That's the founding guy of Mississippi Today. So to what extent is he still just practicing what he did at NBC at Mississippi Today, and that is attacking Republicans? That's sort of their goal. And several print newspapers have used their reports, not necessarily saying it's because of those level of thinking, but they. But see, no,
here's let me explain that to you, because this is a really, really important point that you bring up.
Sure.
The point is this. At a time when newspapers across the state of Mississippi are losing reporting resources, they covet the content that Mississippi Today provides to them for free. So they have masterfully used newspapers as a way of distributing their news. I get it. It's a brilliant strategy. The problem with that is that newspapers who sort of proclaim that they're unbiased, Sun Herald included, that are unbiased, to what extent are they aware of where their funding is coming from? And is there sort of a political agenda behind it? And you're presenting it as unbiased news, but is it really?
And my question to that is that legal? Is there some legality to which direction that's headed to? Now that you mentioned that to me,
I don't know. Listen, my thought is that there's no issues of legality. The legality would only weigh in to the extent that they have to still follow the rules. They have to follow the legal requirements. You know what I mean? So I think it's more of an ethical concern. The newspapers are supposed to be beyond reproach. And if they are taking in this news and presenting this news, and if maybe some of the news is driven by a political agenda, I don't think that Mississippians are getting a fair shake in that regard. I think that it's being presented as objective, and it may not necessarily always be objective. I know this is stinging criticism of Mississippi Today, but it is really the truth, I believe. I've done my research. I've studied their 990 forms. I know who the major contributors are, and I don't think that they fully disclose that.
I certainly agree with you on that. It's more or less for me, I haven't looked at it as in depth as you have, but I've definitely see that from outside the realm, and especially now that they're a part to a lot of different associations, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
At least
yeah. So anyway, I didn't mean to get too deep into that, but hey, when we come back on the other side with Hunter Dawkins, we're going to continue a conversation about some of the news stories that he's covering. We've had a rash of violent crime here along coast of Mississippi. My goodness, man, we're in a culture of violence, and we've got to start to think about what we're going to do about it. I'm curious about what Hunter's thoughts are. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to my show, and I have my friend Hunter Dawkins with us, and I enjoyed that conversation we just had because the media today is all over the board, and newspapers used to have more resources than all other local media combined, and now they don't. And everyone is now a reporter because they have an iPhone in their hand and they can take a picture and post it, and it can go viral. And who knows? Like for example, I posted a video last night of my farmer friend and his family going down the Yazoo River being attacked by Asian carp. Asian carp. And I looked at it. In fact, I'll look at it now while we're on this today. But it's a hilarious video of these Asian carp just pouring into the boat, and the kids were screaming and all of that.
Tate Reeves might try to use that for his campaign about building up the pumps.
But look, I posted it last night. It's been viewed 5,600 times.
Wow.
56 shares. And then I'm looking now, 7,777 people have interacted with it.
The perfect biblical number.
Well, what's interesting is we're not boosting the show, but the point is because if you got something people are interested in on social media, it will travel like wildfire. If Facebook will let it. That's part of the problem is that Facebook often won't let it take off.
You need all those numbers with the casino, that's for sure. So
they want you to pay for it. Hey, listen, Hunter, I'm thrilled to see you writing for SuperTalk Mississippi News. We've talked about this before, but what a great way to bring attention to the Gazebo Gazette and your work here in coastal Mississippi. One of the stories I've talked about a number of times with Rob Siegler, who wrote a column about violence. Had a terrific conversation recently with Paige Roberts from the Jackson County Chamber and
she wrote about
others.
Mental health,
yeah. That gun violence, whether it's about shooting someone else or turning the gun on yourself, sadly. But there is a culture of violence. You look at the shooting recently in Ocean Springs. You had someone in Pasquotank engaged in the shooting in Hancock County. You have the spring break shooting that occurred. man, we've got some problems, don't we?
You had the pregnant girl in Gulfport that was just, it's astonishing, Ricky. And as you and I have spoken about, there has to be something. It's not just a law enforcement deal. It's not just a mental health. It's not a school district deal. It's a community factor. I think there needs to be some advocates in the community. There needs to be parents. There needs to be some type of conglomeration of people together to really to find out what's the solution to this, because it's not a gun issue. It's not a law enforcement issue. It's not a school district issue. It's something in the middle of that. The kids, there's something wrong with what's going on, because either it's social media, and I know you're not going to be able to eliminate social media, but being able to put that into terms to where kids don't necessarily feel threatened. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of someone that I'm close with. Got to the other day, their child was in a issue in the school system where some kids got up and they were very friendly, a group of kids very friendly to this one child, and then they asked him, hey, if he would say these derogatory terms, and they shooting them on camera, on phone camera, and then posting that to social media. It's like, where's the center of how can we tell kids that this is not necessarily the approach to take, because this leads to more concern with mental issues and potential school shootings, potential violence, gun violence out there, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot here. It's complicated in the respect that has to do with, in fact, I saw a video this morning that said that if you don't teach a kid the value of saying no, yep, by the time they're 5, you may lose them. And was talking about the role that parents have in teaching kids that they need to understand no means no. And he says one of the things this guy said on this video, he said that your employer is not going to go, I'm going to count to 3, 1, 2, 3 before they fire you. They're not going to count. We're not doing a good job of teaching kids the value. No, but then you start thinking about that too many kids are being raised in an environment where either both parents are working, or maybe one of the parents are no longer there, or maybe neither parent are there, and they're being raised by grandparents. But where do kids learn the value of no? So if they're not getting the value of no directly from their parents, then who are they learning that from? Maybe they're not learning that at all. Maybe they're learning from their peers. And then who are those peers, and who ends up being the one who influences their thinking the most? And then you add in social media and violent, games that they play. Man, it's super complicated.
Ricky, as I may have told you in the past, I started off teaching after I got out of college, after graduate school in D.C. I came back home and I began teaching in an urban environment right outside of New Orleans. And it's so different from the management level of kids, because these kids have so many problems at home, and that's where violent acts like this start. Right? From kids, going into school, either being pregnant, getting involved in gangs, getting involved in, violent activities.
Yeah. Listen, I hope to have Mitch Landrieu, the former mayor of New Orleans, on my show soon. I'm going to reach out to him and chat with him about it. But he did a lot of, I've often talked about conversations that I had with Mitch while I was there. It's a generational problem. It's a generational challenge. And again, I don't want to go into this because the listener is going to get tired of hearing this, but he often said of the young people that were engaged in violent gang-related activity is that they were younger, they had deadly weapons, and they were just trying to survive. They didn't expect to live through today, and their actions were based on that. So when you have a kid that doesn't expect to be alive tomorrow and he's holding a gun in his hand, he's getting pressure from somebody else, they'll just do things that don't matter, don't really respect human life, and we're seeing that. And so, what do you do about it? The tactical thing, which is short term, is that police presence is really important. But there's a strategic goal, which is what is the long-term solution, and it's multifaceted. It involves schools and churches and communities, and the healthcare community, and mentors and nonprofit groups and governmental groups. I mean, we got to all be in this together, but I don't know who that leader is. Who is emerging on the national stage that's going to just having this conversation? We're not even really having the conversation.
In my opinion, it all has to start. It's not necessarily the one group of people, but it always has to start off with parents. The parents have to get, or if not the parents, the grandparents, they have to get involved in their kids' lives, and then it kind of matriculates from that point. So.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but we do need leadership on this, and we're just not talking about it enough. We have a tendency to cover the mass shootings like, oh my God, the world's coming to an end, which it is. A mass shooting's terrible, but we're not covering that way more people are dying in the inner cities of major cities every single weekend, and we're just not focused on it. And I don't know how we get focused on it. It's a real problem, and it's starting to drift into coastal Mississippi, and it's part of so many of our conversations now. Sadly, it is, but we're not going to turn away from it. We're going to continue to have conversations about it. I thought Rob Siegler did a really terrific job recently in a column he wrote for SuperTalk Mississippi News, and others are thinking about it and talking about it. I think the conversation I had with Mayor Fofo Gillich after the spring break, and I thought one of the best city council meetings I've ever witnessed was the city council meeting that occurred the Tuesday after the spring break shootings, where the mayor was incredibly focused and ready and prepared for that meeting. You had every city councilman had a point of view about this. You had the police chief that had already been on the phone with many people across the nation, including the police chief from Miami. And then you had the community engaged. And when you have a situation like that, that's democracy. That's the way it's supposed to work. And then they need to put some really, really very strong procedures and rules in place for the future spring break activity, much as Alabama has done, much as Florida has done, to curb the fact that we're not going to put up with violence. We're just not going to put up with it. And that's the kind of things you got to do, man. It's going to take all of us working together, and we will continue to talk about it, I think, for the foreseeable future. Unfortunately, sadly, that's just the way it is. So how's it going with you? Okay, I tell you what, we're going to come back on the last segment here with Hunter Dawkins and just see, how is it going at the Gazebo Gazette these days? That's what I was about to ask, but we'll cover that on the other side. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to my show. Appreciate you being here on 103.1, or maybe you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or your favorite podcast. Anyway, thank you for listening. We're visiting with my friend Hunter Dawkins, who owns and he is the CEO and publisher and editor. He's the jack of all trades, actually, for most people in the small newspaper business are at the Gazebo Gazette. That I guess past Christian is where they put their anchor down, but they'll cover beyond that from time to time. Hunter, how's it going? How's it going with your association so far with SuperTalk Mississippi Media?
Well, that's Ricky, as I would tell you, that's the phenomenal part, is that they've allowed me to be able to go outside the box and just talk about a little bit of, number of issues all the way across the board. And I'm greatly appreciative of Steve and Kim and JT all really kind of letting me get involved in that activity. And I've had more opportunities to be on the radio, with not only with yourself, unfortunately, Amanda, I like being on your show, but of course, since I've been able to cover a lot of the professional and college sports, there's been some great activity with that. But I still have to show up to my board meetings every Tuesday night, every other Tuesday night, and I try to watch the supervisors on their YouTube channel every now and then, because I can go to Gulfport every now and then, but Biloxi, it's a hike, and so especially that time. Yeah. But everything else has been good, and it's almost budget season. It's coming up on school districts have budgets pretty much coming, but they're waiting for the city budget to come out because that they decide the mills, and it's kind of up in the air with which each city's going to have their budget issues come up with. So.
Well, you got a lot to say, grace over. I can tell you that is for sure. But I've enjoyed reading. I've enjoyed sort of paying attention. So if you think about what's happening, let's look in the coverage area specifically for the Gazebo Gazette. What are people talking about?
Well, as this last weekend, there was a lot of big issues about the lack of shrimp. The DMR posted the closing of the shrimp season west of the Gulfport Channel, all the way through the Mississippi Sound, and there was some raised concerns about that. There have been a number of fishermen and shrimpers that came out to me and said, "What's going on?" I said, "Hey, I got it out there. You just got to contact DMR." And I'm not necessarily sure they're I kind of understand because there's not enough brown shrimp to compete with white shrimp and all the little specifics, but that was a big issue, especially this last weekend with Blessing the Fleet, because historically, Ricky, with Blessing the Fleet is the opening of the shrimp season, but it's that's sort of closed. But everything else is schools closing. About getting ready to have graduation the next week or so, and everybody's excited about that, and that's a lot of the colleges are I've already had graduation, or they're closing up sports seasons here coming up, but everything's kind of coming to a close for the school year at least. So.
Well, Hunter, people who are watching on Facebook or YouTube, they can see this on SuperTalk TV, but the radio audience can. Where Hunter's sitting behind him are ungodly amount of awards, but you've been well recognized, man. I mean, you got to get in the trenches and do your deal to win that number of awards. I mean, congratulations.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. That's as I've told you before, Ricky. It's I'm sure I'm only halfway to where you're at, but no, it's. A lot of the plaques, with the first place plaques, especially in the community service in the top, with the NNA award that I won, National Newspaper Association award I won. I've had numerous people ask me, "Well, hey, that's very honorable." I said, "Yeah, those are awards that means I work pretty damn hard." So, that's, as especially with the Pulitzer, Ricky, that you had to put in as many hours, as much time period, and it's rewarding after the fact, but it's definitely it's an interesting time, and it's you kind of find out if that's what you really want to do, and it's obviously helped me a lot. So.
Yeah, I've been privileged to work with award-winning teams, Pulitzer Prize-winning teams. My team in Louisiana, on a partnership I put together with Channel 8 in New Orleans, we won, as a result of that effort, 2 Edward R. Murrow Awards and a Peabody Award.
Very important awards.
Yeah, and if it's very unusual for a newspaper to be, to win what are traditional broadcast media awards. Yeah. And for the Peabody Award, we actually went to New York City and accepted the award there, and had wide range. Peabody is a big deal across the spectrum in TV, and just great. But again, being associated with incredible teams. I mean, some of the best writers. Many of them have joined me here on this show from time to time. Some of the best writers and journalists in the United States I've had the real pleasure to work with. And you're doing your gig well, I can tell. Hey, listen, we're out of time for today, but listen, Hunter, thank you for joining me, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I'd love to be on as much as possible, but I know you got other more interesting people, and you got to have.
No, man, you are very interesting and important to talk to. Anyway, this has been Hunter Dawkins from the Gazebo Gazette. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.